It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
No fear here on Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, here on Declare Your Independence. You know, another independence declaring kind of individual, Richard Grove. Richard Grove from a lot of things. I'm gonna go ahead, since it's been a little bit since Richard's been on the show, and he's been on quite a few times, and we're good friends. I mean, we hang out a lot of different things, but I wanted to make sure he gets a good intro to you guys. So I'm going to read his whole 5-page bio. No, it's a couple paragraphs, but I just want you to know who he is. There's a lot more to Richard than this, and his wife Lisa. I mean, they're a team, and just like Donna and I. Now, Richard Grove is a forensic historian and independent media producer, host of GrandTheftWorld podcast, founder of TragedyAndHope.com, and Autonomy University of Reason. Through Tragedy and Hope, Richard has produced scores of long-form podcasts, long form, and deep dive documentary films to share the truths he's uncovered along the way, including the Peace Revolution podcast, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, 9/11 Synchronicity, and Grand Theft World podcast. In addition to those media productions, Richard teaches a course for freedom seekers and entrepreneurs called Autonomy. Now, we're going to probably talk about that a little bit. He develops solutions to provide individuals with skills and growth towards financial independence and a future of unparalleled self-actualization. We'll focus in on that, too. Minded individuals seeking to upgrade their access to freedom with essential skills and knowledge. And a lot of it was grandparents and parents, signing up their kids, go get autonomized, and, so you'll have some autonomy. And we'll talk about that. Richard sees freedom as being composed of 3 primary ingredients: non-aggression, physical self-defense, and intellectual self-defense. And he creates media to educate and inform those who seek to understand how our world really works. A little bit of history on how he knows how it really works. We may talk about that, too. Richard hosts the weekly Grand Theft World podcast to feature the information that the world needs to break the mental chains of bondage and mind control used to suppress human freedom. Richard freaking Grove! All right. Now, this is one thing that I want, to start off right away. You can help me out with. I want you to go ahead and give a little bit of history of you and Lisa early on, how you came aware of it's a great, fantastic 3-hour podcast just from that. But so people understand how you know. You don't think you know. Yeah, I know. Okay? How the world really works. I don't know how elevator speechy you can do that, but try. Go.
All right, so once upon a time, I was a software executive. I was working in New York City. I met my wife. She encountered some unethical problems at her employer, ended up going to court against her employer for several years. I became a federal whistleblower in 2003. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, I represented myself against a multi-billion-dollar company that is now Dell. It used to be called EMC. It was the biggest tech merger back in the day. And after 6 years, I found no justice, but I learned a lot more about the game, and I call it my $1 million education. So even though I could present the evidence in court of these executives admitting that they were doing wrongdoing, and then that opened our national security up to a bunch of loopholes. When you put backdoor software into publicly traded companies, it spells disaster for an economy. And given what Robert Maxwell made his living at, putting backdoors in software for our Justice Department, national security issues and backdoors and software have gone hand in hand for a long time. So I blew the whistle, sacrificing a multi-million-dollar career, having faith that my career doesn't mean much if this country gets scuttled by people trying to take it over and use it to take over the world. So through that whistleblowing process and representing myself in court against a multi-billion-dollar law firm, in addition to a multi-billion-dollar defendant, I learned a lot about how the world really works. It is not the Schoolhouse Rock balanced three branches of government. It is something supranational that is run on it's run on a lot of things that are outside the boundaries of our legal system. So in asking the question, what did I just bump into and what else does it connect to? I was able to answer the question of a lot of international corporate skullduggery that is eroding our freedom day by day around the world. So since 2004, I began researching into they, them, those who can easily be named, and they're trying to take away our freedom. Books about how global warming and humanity's the enemy, and they write books about eugenics. Yeah. And so I started getting a true education after, trailblazing off the beaten path and finding my own way in the world. And a lot of people say, well, it must have been hard to sacrifice a multi-million-dollar career. And I said, well, it was easier to keep my integrity than that career. And I think the price has been worth it. So,
that's because
that's the gist.
That's good enough. It's because Richard is, Iowa farm boy or Pennsylvania or where the hell you're from. Well, you grew up. I ask a lot of people. I always go, why? Why do you even care? Why was this important? Why? He was a farm boy. He grew up, with ethics and kind of went to Nueva York City. What did you think was going to happen? And he got exposed to all this stuff. He's like, whoa, this is like wrong, right? And this is illegal, right? Well, we're gonna go use the justice system in America, and I went through that, but I kind of knew it was already jacked up, but I wanted to force him to say it, son bitch, say it. So you went through the say it part, and they said it, and they go, we don't care what you say. So you did a lot of research. You started wanting to understand the game. You read a lot of books. Richard calls things artifacts all the time. And the reason is because he goes to the actual book. And being in New York, you probably actually find the first edition of whatever book. And he takes it. He has, a camera that goes down on his desk, and he puts it. See, it says right here. Oh yeah, and subsequent versions don't say that. And then he just gets down in the nitty gritty of it. And when I laughed when he said long form, podcast on various different subjects. I got to tell this one story. I finally get him to go to Porcupine Freedom Festival. And he goes, and we're hanging, and it was Sunday it started. It hadn't even really started. People were just setting up. So where we were staying, we go down there, and I'm going, yeah, I'll just show you, because I got to do a show early there. They had a media room that I had to do, so you'll find your way here. We'll go there tonight and kind of show you what's up. So we get there, and we stop at one of the vendors. People are pulling into the parking lot, and a group of about, 6 guys had driven straight through from Florida all the way to New Hampshire. And I go, I know that voice. Yeah, that's Ernie. We go, what's up, And one of the guys goes, yeah, I started listening to you that time you interviewed Richard Grove. I'm a fan of Richard Grove. We love Richard Grove. We've been listening to his 23-plus hour New World Order whatever podcast all the way from Florida till they pulled in the parking lot and it stopped. They were done. And I go, well, he's standing right there. We're not worthy. All of a sudden, and then he had an entourage all night, and I didn't see him anymore, and he was gone. He thought I set it up. He goes, yeah, you set that up, didn't you? And I go, nope. I told you, man, you had fans. So he's taken autonomy, and a lot of his guys, we have some pictures up here you'll see scrolling, to where he sets up, describe what that is, what you've accomplished over the last years of doing Pork Fest, who are the guys helping, describe that for him.
I mean, first off, there's the point where you're like, I'm not read into what's going on. So you look for more information. So I'm pointing around me to all these books that I've read about they, them, those who can easily be named. And once you start to get into some of the interesting stuff about them admitting their plan and how real it is, how detailed it is, how long it's been going on, you kind of want to tell other people. Because you're like, me knowing this doesn't stop it. But if I start telling other people and I warn them about the pitfalls and I point out the evidence such that they don't have to believe me, they could just know about the evidence and be informed, then I think we're going to live in a better place. So I went from reading the books to making, my first podcast was 9/11 Synchronicity. And maybe my longest episode was 10 hours. My next podcast starting in 2009 was Peace Revolution, and there's several episodes that are like 20 hours because they are the total encapsulation of audio evidence, video evidence on this topic. So if you go and listen to the 20-hour JFK 50th anniversary episode, you will consistently hear throughout that episode first-person recounts of evidence that differs from the official narrative that you've never heard before, even though you're a fan of that topic. So I always prided myself on trying to encapsulate not just like what is known, but to find some new stuff and add it and contribute it to that great conversation. At a certain point, I needed to learn how to make films and edit footage, and I started to learn to do that. So my first two documentaries, even though I was a podcaster, my documentaries had no narration. It was just text on screen like it was the early 1900s. And then at a certain point, I started filming interviews. And then I started to get in front of other whistleblowers with those interviews. The one that you helped me set up once upon a time was Bill Binney. And that on my YouTube page, that's had over 1 million views for years now. So a lot of people have seen that particular 4-hour interview with the former technical director of the National Security Agency. And you'll see in there's some pieces of history that go back, to World War II and beyond, that the American public should understand in context to be able to understand the current surveillance and censorship infrastructure that someone like Binney was talking about. I made the 5-hour ultimate history lesson with John Taylor Gatto right before he had a stroke. So that was also an important part in my learning how to edit footage and to bring other people's messages to a wider audience. And then after that, I made a couple shows because now I knew production. So I had a 24-episode series called The Deep End. I had a 24-episode series called History So It Doesn't Repeat. And those episodes back then would take me like 60 hours to edit because there's 5 camera angles and computers are slow. But now with streaming and the digitization and the democratization of technology and having friends like yourself and Mr. Slopey and other people who are super nerdy, we've made a lot of progress over the years, and we continue to innovate and provide solutions into a problem-ridden environment.
That was a lot of big words in there. You the man. Thank you for. One of the things right here where it says in omnia paratus, that's Latin, I'm sure, for what?
Be prepared for anything. And we give you the skills to do that, because once you know how to learn anything, then whatever problem in front of you is only a problem because learning hasn't been done yet, and now you have no excuse not to do the learning. And so you can eradicate problem after problem and make progress so much faster in life with less stress, less energy output.
One thing I always, when we get all the stories from Richard Grove of, the history, it's kind of, we do a regular show with Corbett, same thing. It's all history. This is really good. Now what? Well, he now wanted me. He did the autonomy thing. So go ahead and tell the people what autonomy is.
Well, after 8 years of Ernie asking me, now what? I said, I got a now what? I spent 10 years creating a curriculum that is based on, like, what are the ingredients we need for a freedom curriculum? And let's start with, if we used to have some freedom in this country, what did they take out of education in order to make it schooling in the first place? They took away free will, freedom of association, freedom to pursue your own intellect and ask a question and follow it to an answer. And instead, they've got this whole system of bells and, teachers and authority. So they've created a system that's antithetical to education. So first, we notice that we put back the pieces that people need for a real education, and then we amplify that with learning algorithms so that you can now go around and learn. Like, I can't give you physical prowess, but I can teach you how to learn anything. And that's a very powerful skill, especially if you know what you're trying to do as far as a goal, and you reverse engineer to what you don't know and what you don't have, and you figure out how to get those things. That is the modality where you can emancipate yourself from mental slavery and physical and economic slavery all in one. So it's a very powerful algorithm of individual parts, how they fit together, remove the contradictions, and then you have a result that you can try and improve upon with that same learning algorithm. So becoming aware of how we learn is called meta learning, and then applying that learning algorithm to our available information source, internet, that's hyper learning. So autonomy students not only learn what they should have taught us in school, but they're taught anti-scarcity thinking, anti-fragility, right? Growth mindset, how to conquer problems, how to solve issues, how to learn anything, how to work and play well with others, how to find opportunity, how to overcome impossible challenges, how to cut through overwhelm, like all the stuff we have to do every day to be a man and be productive on our homesteads. Like that problem solving mentality can be applied to a lot of other areas as well. So it's about helping people to become better, well-rounded, more balanced, less stress, more peace of mind, and much more agency to do things in the world. Instead of hoping that someone else is going to take care of it for you, you can just do it.
You know, that's one thing that I've been emphasizing a lot lately. You know, what the problem has been is the delegation of your autonomy and authority to someone else to fix it for you. I'll vote this guy, he'll fix it for me. No, I'll be on team the other guy, you know, or gal or whatever. And it's just the idea that you're responsible for yourself has just been beaten out of us. It's intentional. As time goes on and you look back, you know, because I have the experience, you know, the benefit of hindsight from, I lived in the 70s, you know, and going through junior high and high school in the 70s, I went through affirmative action, and you know, right at the end, you know, I remember the Vietnam War on TV all the time. Then it's Watergate, and then you know, you had the Iran hostage crisis, you had the Cold War, invasion of Afghanistan, oil embargoes, all the programming, all the crap, all of the Mockingbird stuff, all of the, you know, 80 million people watched the same program the night before and talked about in the culture of how we were, you know, predictive programming of everything. And as time went on and you get to now, you're going, wow, a lot of this stuff was done on purpose. There was an intent. And as people come to realize a lot of things, the one thing that I realized, certainly when I started my activism in the late 80s, is that these people are not the same as us. They're bad. There's an evil quotient. And then just recently, really within the last 7-8 years, I realized what it was. They're sociopaths. I hear that word all the time, didn't know what it meant. They have no love, compassion, empathy. They don't care how loud the puppy
they have a
screams
special brand of
as they're
psychopathy.
squishing it. I'm sorry?
They have a special brand of psychopathy.
What is it?
Did you get it? They have a special brand of psychopathy. Like, they are inculcated around people who have absolute power. With absolute power comes absolute corruption, and those people they're sociopathic, I dare say psychotic, though that cuts them away from responsibility for their actions. So I prefer to stay with sociopath. They know what they're doing is ill for other people, and that's why they lie about it in order to attain and maintain power. So they're intellectually bankrupt, but they're entirely ruthless, and most honest people don't know how to bridge that gap and insulate themselves, more importantly, from getting shocked by that system.
You know, it was very simple. Once I understood that they don't care, you know, they have no shame. There's no guilt. There's no shame. Once you have that, you know, then you can do anything. And that was the one thing that I realized. We're at a disadvantage because if you're up against someone, certainly political campaigns or in a legal battle or just a neighborhood, and if they don't care what you think, if they don't care who they hurt, if they don't care, they have an advantage. You know, they'll do whatever it takes to get whatever they want. They'll 10 o'clock at night and slit your tires. I mean, you know, whatever. This is what we're dealing with. So how do you deal with that? Do you have a test before they can be in office? Do you just eliminate the idea of government altogether? I mean, what's your solution, you think?
Well, it's a difficult problem. Some of the problems we're talking about are caused by voting itself. So let's just take that out of the equation. If you're looking to be, like, for instance, the way I do it for autonomy is a similar problem that we're solving. You know, there's people out there that might want to come in and disturb things or ruin people's learning experiences. Okay, well, what are the traits of those people? And how do we make sure that there's a little work involved such that those people don't want to do the work to go cause problems? And so the people who want the result will go through legitimate work to get there. And most people trying to get in for the wrong reasons will quit on themselves, which is why they're a troll in the first place. So by seeing like the nature of people who disrupt and then creating a system that is like an opposite harmonic frequency from what attracts them, then you're able to get people to take actions on their own, come to complete transparency, prove to themselves they can do the learning, and then it's much easier for them to participate in that growth. Similarly with politics, if we had, like, you know, you got to put some skin in the game, and you can't go raise from corporations or foreign entities to do your thing, and you're actually going to have a meaningful platform that is supported by people locally. Otherwise, they're not going to vote for you. But when you have all these magnets near the game, and those magnets are money, and it takes your congressman, and it takes your vote and your interest and puts it over here, maybe with another country's interests, those types of things are going to continue to go on until people raise their intellect far enough to stop tolerating it. And at that point, you can take away the oxygen from the system and stop that fire.
What's the oxygen for the system? Focus on that a little bit. Take the oxygen away from the system, which is what?
People's assumptions and care. Yeah, I mean, people's assumptions and care. Assumption that what you're being told by authorities is actually reflective of reality. And if it was reflective of reality, why couldn't you come to that conclusion by observing reality? Why do you need that authority to frame it up for you in that particular way? So first, being incredulous, lacking the ability to believe things at first glance, and disciplining yourself to always examine with a nature of curiosity to understand before you conclude prior to observation. So condemnation prior to observation is the epitome of ignorance. So wisdom is just doing the opposite. Before I take a position or take an opinion, and knowing that I don't even need opinions most of the time, they're not really useful. So I should just limit myself to useful knowledge. And if it's not useful knowledge, I'm going to dismiss it as arbitrary because it doesn't reflect reality. From there, I can not only plan and attain my goals and lower my frustration and aggression, because frustration always leads to aggression, and frustration is caused by blocking goals. So now, by giving people the ability to learn that unlocks their goals, their mental health can go up, because now they're engaged in meaningful, substantial activities that they are self-directing them, they're writing their own script in life, maybe for the first time. They're self-directing, and they're starting to get meaning. And that meaning is, very important to living a well-balanced and happy life.
When you started autonomy it's been several years, 8 years or more? It's been a while. When you started that, how many classes have you had? Because you put them every few months, a year. How many rounds have you gone through, and how large is your participation on your forums and so on? Because once you started it, the alumni participated with the others. That was part of their thing. You networked, you created a lot of capable people, which my intent from the beginning was to Shanghai everybody he trained so that I could use them for whatever, and he was taking the best. I'm like, now share a little with the whole team here. I mean, what up? So this is, he's created an army. I want to know how big it is. How many classes have you had with that?
I teach autonomy twice a year. It's the flagship course of Breakthrough Actions. So it's a 12-week course. I teach it in the spring. I teach it in the fall. This is the 14th time coming up that I've taught it. And we've had about 1,000 students go through the curriculum over the past 13 seasons. Many of them have gone through many, many times. So even though it's the same course, that person is on the old ones. So people keep coming back through and through. So it's a long-term educational solution that can help you address your short-term problems for sure, but it allows you to really broaden your perspective for what you can accomplish during your lifetime. And so for less than the cost of a semester at community college, you get a lifetime education with evergreen skills that are always valued by people in any market around the world. And from there, now you have the ability to learn any skill and teach yourself how to playing and not just be a spectator saying, I wish things were different. You could be a mover and a shaker actually out there making things different because you know how to coordinate and orchestrate your actions into reality from an idea that you might call a dream. I don't deal with, hey, I have a dream of owning a business. Okay, so what does that look like in the future? What granular detail do you have so far? And then let's reverse engineer to where you're at and see what the next step forward might be. So in these situations, the ability to reach around the world for people from different, colors, creeds, religions, geolocations, find these skills useful, immediately easy to pick up. There's a lot of things you can figure out from that methodology to figure out all the other steps. So it's not too hard. It's taking away people's excuses and removing the obstacles that gives them success. So if I can help them be self-disciplined, to be accountable to their own word, that's one part. And then they need the skills and resources and in the midst of other people in a dynamic, interactive kind of incubator. So it's a growth experience that's accelerated because we all need to catch up faster than, in a linear fashion. And this is a way for people to kind of leapfrog over some of those hurdles and obstacles, get started, and then be able to clear your own path from there. So it's been a lot of fun. It's one of the most meaning a father and a husband. But other than that, how I get to spend my time during the week helping people from all over the world is very invigorating, substantial, meaningful, all the good things. Not frustrating at all.
You're a lot of the different special things that you do, the history blueprint, your brain model, a lot of the podcasts that are evergreen for history and so on. What's your favorite? What do you think is the most, you really need to go learn about this? When they go to, GrandTheftWorld.com or Tragedy and Hope, or where do you send them? Should they start?
Well, my most useful tool is my history blueprint because I use it every week on Grand Theft World. So let's say we were talking about 9/11 foreshadowing before 9/11. Well, I'd say, do you know about this license to kill document from 1998, Foreign Affairs?
Wait a minute, put it back up. I want people to
November,
see.
December edition. It's right here. Yeah, it's right here. Oh, the brain's right there. And then it holds the relational diagram and yields this artifact, which I can pull up here after I get their call to action off. So, license to kill Osama bin Laden's Declaration of Jihad, December 1998 by Bernard Lewis, who's a neocon. So this is an interesting artifact, but also do I still have the other artifact up? Let's show it. Let's go back to the brain. Let's go back a page. But there's another article, catastrophic terrorism right here. So now I can open this up on the Council on Foreign Relations site. I could take you over here. You can see this is from the same issue. So in the same issue of Foreign Affairs before 9/11, you've got Bernard Lewis telling you to be scared of Osama bin Laden. He's got a license to kill. He's the new terrorist you need to watch out for. And you have this catastrophic terrorism tackling the new danger by three infamous authors. One being Ashton Carter, a Rhodes Scholar. So that's a Cecil Rhodes Scholar. And really, that's a Rothschild-funded Cecil Rhodes Scholarships scholar. So he's doing the work of the globalist. He got rewarded after 9/11 by being Secretary of Defense. John Deutsch is the second gentleman named as an author in this article. Where do we know him from? Late 1990s, Maxine Waters press conference where they said that the CIA was dealing crack cocaine in the streets of LA and other places. And John Deutsch is the apologist for the CIA up there saying there's nothing to be seen here. Interesting, because he also has a lot of ties in with people who would benefit from 9/11. The third author is Philip Zelikow, someone who did his understudy and graduate work on creating public myths, and he later becomes the executive director of the 9/11 Commission report. Well, that's interesting. Now that we have context, what does it say in this article? It talks about World Trade Center and a new Pearl Harbor and all these things that were in the PNAC document, the Rebuilding America's Defenses that came out later in 1998. So there's two pieces of evidence that show who benefits from an attack like 9/11. And it doesn't point back to the guys with the box cutters, but it does point to a group of people who have had an open declaration to take over America, bring it back into the British Empire, and use it to take over the planet for a new world order.
You know, this is go back to the brain. I want the people to understand how this works.
Yeah.
Any subject that you put in there, what the software allowed for Richard to do was to connect everything that connected to the people and the events that is being, being highlighted here. So when you go to a person, well, what are the other persons and organizations the person is? I found this enormously useful in any research that I did back in the day. When I came across this, that was the big reason why I wanted to talk. I'm like, what the crap? Who did this? You know, he did. You know, and it was software you could, you know, the only reason I didn't, you had to buy it and it kind of used it on their servers or something unless you bought something. Anyway, so I just used Freedom's Phoenix kind of to do what we did, but you know, Richard was the inspiration for this kind of tree. And are you still using it? Do you keep adding to it? How many entries do you have on that thing?
Yeah, right now I have 10,000 entries and 50,000 references for those 10,000 entries. So like Ashton Carter, you know, I mentioned him as a Cecil Rhodes scholar. They have a directive, like Rhodes left his last will to take America and put it back in the British Empire to take over the world. So anywhere you see Rhodes scholar, like this former director of CIA, James Woolsey, right? You have to think these are Anglo-American agendas. This is not an American agenda that's commandeering the CIA. This is something bigger than that. So if we went up to like the British infiltration of the U.S. intelligence community, you got all the movers and shakers because our OSS, our CIA, and NSA were all modeled directly after the British, GCHQ, MI6, and other agencies. So when you see a lot of people who have dual allegiance, not only to America, but to the opium syndicate that America separated from once upon a time, a lot of those Eastern establishment skull and bones type families, they were all still in the drug syndicate smuggling all the way up through Iran-Contra, BCCI, and all the other things that have precipitated since.
Now, this is, you know, all in your head, and it's you know, you can bring it, you can't say anything to Richard without a history lesson of how it got there and who did it and whatever, which is great. But how do you summarize it to a newbie? You got Generation Next coming up, you know, and I'm like, you know, freedom good, government bad, bad, bad. If they can, they are. I mean, you know, that kind of thing, you know, bumper sticker stuff. You're still voting? I mean, you know, so, I mean, what is it that you would summarize as a perspective that someone should have going down these rabbit holes?
Well, that's a long form answer. So I have a long form answer, and it would be the underground history of America, which I think lives on Rumble. But if you wanted a subsection of that that's supranational, you could also check out my documentary on Rumble. It's a presentation I did for Ed Griffin. It's called The Underground History of Israel-Palestine. So what the answer to your question is, you have to take the facts and formulate a narrative story, because that's how people load data. And they got the ill narrative story right away, within days after, within hours after 9/11, within minutes after 9/11, they were like, Osama bin Laden did this. Like, there was no investigation. They knew who did it from the get-go, who they were going to pin it on at least. And so learning how to identify these things for yourself and seeing what done right looks like makes all the difference, because as George W. Bush said, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, fool get fooled again, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
He didn't get it right, was my point.
So Israel, you know, it's always the third rail Israel. I don't have a problem. Bring it on, man. Let's talk about Israel. I don't care. You know, and it's been interesting to see when I first started doing radio, Terran Radio out of Scottsdale here, and the station owner was Jewish, and we had, you know, the VP of the Zionist Americans for whatever, and had them come on. Yeah, bring them on, man. Let's talk about it. And they're always advocating for Israel is special. Israel's different. Israel needs, foreign policy is we give money, and everybody else shouldn't get any. I can't believe you give. Okay, I'm with you, man. Foreign policy is my money. What the hell am I? Except Israel, that's different. So I'm just wondering all the stuff that's going on, and certainly this Gaza thing that's happening now. It's just, in my opinion, if it's not exposing who runs what, I don't know what else they need for them to do what they're doing to the Palestinians, the Gaza Strip, the Gazans, and bulldoze of what. I mean, this is just unseemly as hell. And for Trump to be cozying up to this, and when you get all the bodies scraped off, we'll put a hotel there or something. What's going on? There's something. Give us the Israel-U.S. relationship, and take your time with some history. I mean, don't give me 30 minutes, but I want to get the full story so that people have the context of what's going on now. Would you please, Richard?
In the late 1800s, a group of robber barons decided that they thought nationalism was dead and probably international communism could be a way that they could rule the whole planet. So they went about funding the capitalists and the communists, and in the meanwhile, they brought in a little Federal Reserve here to suck off all our wealth so that we're left with $40 trillion in debt to bankers. We're not sure who they are, but those bankers, parallel to that story, were planning in the 1800s to colonize a far-off land of biblical lore and to give that identity to some people in Europe and say, you got to move back here. It says the real estate guy didn't have it on him then, but he's got it now, and you got to come back right away. And there's a lot of history that's like swept under the rug or not talked about through that whole thing. And I wouldn't pay much attention to it if the United States hadn't been funding for my entire lifetime a regime that was born out of legitimate terrorism with the King David Hotel bombing in 1946, 1947. I think it was July 22nd, 1947, maybe. So the age of terrorism that we came into with 9/11 had actually been going on for like 80 years in another part of the world. And during that time, you also had the communist revolution. So you had the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and then a lot of the Soviets were, had the same agenda, but they weren't going to go to Israel because they were happy in the Soviet Union. They had taken over their country with the Bolshevik. I remember when I was a kid and I learned about, Leon Trotsky or Stalin or Lenin, and here's their real names, right? And that was the first thing. I was like, oh, these guys all changed their names? That's interesting. That's interesting, but I didn't know what to make of it. But then you come across this other line of political figures who have all changed their names. Bibi Netanyahu grew up in Philadelphia. He was known as Benjamin Netai when he spoke at age 28 in Boston. He's got one social security number and 4 or 5 aliases in this country, and yet he's the prime minister of a good time ally that, according to this book, stole nuclear weapons from a place near where I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of interesting things aside from the Robert Maxwell, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell history that people have been into that's connected into a larger state's planned espionage campaign that's been going on for decades and decades. If you want to get the trace on it, a lot of people recommend Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail Volumes 1 and 2. But I would note that Whitney starts her story, I think, in 1941 with Operation Underworld and U.S. intelligence getting into bed with the cartels and mafioso of the time to collaborate against the Nazis. But if you read back a little, if you read back a little bit further in history, in 1938, MI6 cuts a deal with Meyer Lansky and his syndicate to start opium, heroin kind of connections and funding and things like this. So there's a longer history of these things with our good time ally, the UK, than there is physically with us as a nation. So there's a long story that has unfolded that most people have only been read into one side of. And I just tell people, before you reach a conclusion and take some sort of decisive action, you might want to look at the other side of the history so you can make an informed decision and be more balanced in your actions. Instead of what they want is they want everyone driven to the extremes of hatred, and that's how they could foment a civil war. In fact, in 1963, the year of JFK's assassination, there was published, maybe it was 1961. There was published at Stanford University a book called A Casual View of America, The Home Letters of Solomon de Rothschild, 1859 to 1861, something like that. It was published and edited by Sigmund Diamond for Stanford University. It's the centennial of the letters in the book. So it's a book of Civil War letters, and it's published on the 100th anniversary of the archive. And those letters are from the young scion of the Rothschild family sent to America, age 27, named Solomon de Rothschild. And he, in his letters back home, he says, look, I've stayed with all the wealthy and powerful families in the North, and here's where they are. I've stayed with the wealthy and powerful families in the South, and here's where they are. And he talks about the need to drive everybody to the extremes so that they can foment civil war. And also, he calls Lincoln a thief. So if you're ever looking for people with motive to kill Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, it might be the bankers that he cut off and had to print greenbacks, and they called him a thief. But anyway, he died, so you don't have to worry about that now. These guys talk in detail at the beginning of the Civil War what is to be the conclusion of the Civil War. The North and South will fight each other like two locomotives under a full head of steam on the same track. There will be no vanquished. Everybody will lose, and the bankers can come in and buy everything pennies on the dollar. So that type of prediction of a future 5-year war that's made by a 27-year-old kid and preserved by Stanford University, I think is noteworthy, and people should start to consider it wasn't just the North and the South. Russia was involved, the UK was involved, international bankers were involved. There's a lot bigger story to the Civil War than has been told to the American public, for good reason, because when you have people who can read and think, it is a real challenge to that authority out there that continues to try to grind down our freedom. But if you teach people to read and they don't know how to think, they believe everything they're told, and they're very malleable and under control.
This is where you get in, to emphasizing the trivium. Talk about that and define that for people, will you please?
The trivium is a process of 3 individual parts, right? So at the beginning, you noted that freedom, which is the central thought, it is non-aggression, intellectual self-defense, physical self-defense. Physical self-defense is not freedom. Intellectual self-defense is not freedom. Non-aggression is not freedom. But when you have all 3 of these ingredients together, freedom is the result, okay? Same thing with the trivium, the individual parts, how they fit together, and how to use and troubleshoot device, object, subject, topic, is the same as grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar is the individual parts. Logic is how they fit together without contradiction. Rhetoric is what is the action to be taken from this line of conclusionary thinking. So by studying the individual parts, how they fit together, removing the contradictions, and then knowing how to take a decision and make an action and judge the results and learn again is the essence of a learning process. It's been around for thousands of years. It was codified by the Christian church as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But if you look up the same diagram that shows Father, Son, Holy Ghost, it's the same diagram as grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The grammar itself is not truth. The logic itself is not truth. The rhetoric itself is not truth. But when those things are together without contradiction, that's how we find truth. So now if we know how to find knowledge, freedom, and truth, we are better armed than our opposition who does not know how to do such things. They only know how to destroy. They can't create. And once you know how to become a creator mentality, a producer in the world instead of a consumer, instead of a spectator, that is putting you closer to living a lifestyle of freedom that can be passed on through example to other people very rapidly.
So where did this concept, and when did it present itself to you? How did you embrace that so much? What study brought that up to your awareness?
I was looking at a lot of the problems and coming to some conclusions, and then I was looking for, there's a formula to learn. That's the input, right? What does the output expression look like? Well, it's the same 3 parts, but they're in a different order. So no one's going to care about the how until they care about the what, and they don't care about the what until you get to the why. And if you go why, what, how, that is a passable, acceptable form of knowledge-based currency transaction in our marketplace. If you start with the what and the how, and people don't know the why, they're not going to pay attention long enough to deliver that payload of information. So in learning about these three various parts, it predates Christianity to some extent with the Greeks. And this goes back to like the theories of Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem, and knowing the relationships of the various angles to the lengths of triangles, right? So they had a whole bunch of nerdy stuff back in the day. You don't necessarily need to internalize all that if you can get the gist of any instruction book you've looked at to, get a new product. What's in there? Individual parts, how they fit together, how to use and troubleshoot it. You open some Lego instructions. What is it? All the individual parts, how they fit together, how to have fun with the Legos. So this learning mechanism, this learning algorithm has been arm's length from us implicit our whole life. But now you grab it explicitly and you say, oh, I have a tool to learn anything. Let me go study the form and function of this saw, of this camera, of this car. And either, if it's software, there's buttons, icons, and menus. You go through all that, all the functionality of that new software. You didn't need a teacher or a tutorial. You can just figure it out. New chainsaw. Well, I know how to work a chainsaw. This one has a button. Oh, okay, this one's a little different. You got to grip it on the handle like this, right? So how to familiarize yourself from general understanding to specific interaction with that tool is just a series of asking a few questions. Why is this shaped like this? Oh, it's so that can fit through there, right? So it's coming to understand the world around us on a more granular, detail, and consistent level. It makes a huge difference in problem solving, making progress, having fun, making good friends, keeping good friends, all those good things.
One of the things that you've done is you finally bought your own home that you're renovating and doing, and you know how to use a hammer now. I mean, so it's, tell me about that experience of going through, manual labor and building, and how it's changed you, having your son, teaching your son, how to, here's a power screwdriver. I mean, all this actual building and stuff and raising a son, I'm interested in the progression you've had over the years since I've known you.
Well, when I grew up, Ernie, way back in the day, I like to think of it as the good old days. I smelled like two-cycle oil and sawdust because we were always chopping down trees on weekends and splitting wood and stacking wood and bringing wood into the house, drying wood out, burning wood, taking the ashes out, repeat, repeat, repeat. So I had a upbringing in the woods, in a very, I told my parents, I said, you did such a good job bringing me up and having me surrounded by honest people that it put me in a disadvantage when I went to Manhattan and I found out there's less than scrupulous people out there. So it's like prodigal son. You move away from that environment to go off to the big city and make your fortune, but then you discover the reality of the world out there and you really appreciate. So I wasn't going to move back to Western Pennsylvania, but I found a place that's, on top of a mountain, in a place where I have a lot of good friends and connections and family life up here. And it was a real gut check. I mean, it's been gut checks for nothing but the past 4 months. It's like you have to be able to make decisions without 100% certainty, right? So you're filling in that uncertainty with your skills, right? Can we get into this house, get a construction loan, fix all the stuff, and be in there by the end of summer? Maybe. I don't know. Let's try. Oh, the construction loan's not going to be a thing because the other party needs to close before we can get that set up and get the bids. Okay, let's just pay out of pocket. If you're paying out of pocket, maybe I should do some of this stuff myself because I know how and I have the ability in my time schedule to be able to take on and juggle multiple activities. So I can still teach at Autonomy. I can do Grand Theft World, and I can still do renovations and teach myself whatever I need to know. So the property that we wanted, we had been interested in for a long time, and it became available. And it wasn't just a gut check. It was like, you got to burn your ships and make a decision. Like, you're going to make this work. Otherwise all else fails. Right. So, when I first looked at it, like the driveway had a 50-foot pond in it. So the first thing before we could even work on the house is we had to like raise the level of the driveway. And then we set up the sawmill. We started cutting some trees. We trimmed like, I don't know, 30 or 50 trees around the house, got cut down. All the inside, like the plumbing was all shot because it wasn't winterized. So I had to tear out all the plumbing, put new plumbing in. The heating was all shot, so we had to replace that. The roof was shot, so we had to replace that. All these good things along the way, all the way up through like I'm doing trim and appliances now. So it's becoming a reality. We got moved in like 3 weeks ago and been living out of our suitcases kind of until we got the rest of the renovation stuff taken care of. We've had a couple places where you take 5 steps forward and 6 steps back, you know, but that happens, and it's how you meet and greet that, oh, interesting thing that just happened, flooding, you know, you just, you know, you end up working on a water line and it still had pressure in it or whatever the thing is. You got to, if you panic and get upset, you're just pushing off solving the problem. So knowing how to meet these various, oh, that just happened, what do we do about it? And thinking creatively and being in a calm, cool position to say, I either know how to do this, I'm going to learn how to do it, I'm going to go to YouTube and learn how to do it, call a friend, you know, before I call a contractor. So I've only had a contractor for the roof, and I had a contractor for the to get rid of the popcorn ceiling that was all through the house.
I know how to do that.
But otherwise, I use my autonomy skills to do whatever I need. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, tell the audience about your experience with your son, Luke. You know, this is, you know, Donna and I were real supportive of you and Lisa having children, all the stuff that's going on. And we go, you got to be a dad and a mom. You got to. You know, and how's that going? I love Luke. He's a cool kid. What's up?
It's going wonderfully well. He's almost 10 years old. You and Donna were definitely the cheerleaders we needed to hear back then, because, you know, we were like the couple at the beginning of Idiocracy. Like, oh, it wouldn't be smart to bring a person into the world right now with what's going on. And then you realize how, like, that's how they're outbreeding us, right? It's like they're breeding the world with dumb people. We need to bring some freedom people into this place and keep it going. So, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a growth experience, becoming a dad. And, you know, my son had some seizures. He went without oxygen during the birthing process. So he had some seizures. We took him in. They said that he had a stroke and that he was going to have brain damage in his frontal lobe and all this scary stuff that they want to fill parents up with right away. Right. And I was like, no, that's not why we waited this long to become parents. That's not our ride. And he's perfectly healthy now, right? So you know where that's at. But when he was in the hospital back then, it was like probably 2 weeks into him being in the neonatal intensive care unit. And the last piece of footage I had of him before he took and had the seizure, we were changing his diaper in the hospital, and it was like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And Jim Croce was on my Pandora with Time in a Bottle, right? And I remember just like, this is what we've been, like, the whole song, you know, was about, like, that moment. And then after a couple of weeks of not knowing if he, like, what his future was going to be, and him having a spinal tap and all sorts of other nasty tests, we went to the cafeteria in the hospital. And we, you know, go there once or twice a day to get food, because, you know, you're not leaving the hospital to get food. They have it there. So you go there. And the whole time they had a piano, grand piano, sitting in the corner of the cafeteria. And no one ever touched it, right? So this one day I go in there, and I'm really, like, I've still got that song in my head the whole time for the 2 weeks. And I haven't told anybody about that song or anything, right? This dude walks over. He sits down at the piano. He plays Time in a Bottle, gets up and leaves. And I was like, oh, that's the universe telling me we're going to be okay. Like, that's a light at the end of the tunnel. That's, you know, right? And a couple days later, they let us bring him home after we learned CPR, and they hooked him up to a machine that would false alarm 60 times a day where you think your kid's dying or something. And we grew through all that with so much appreciation and love and consideration that, you know, he ended up being 100% fine. He's awesome. I can see him right now. He's outside.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know he had, you know, any. I knew you had some issues, but I had no idea you were scared that much. He's a normal kid. He's a boy. you know. So, and, you know, he's fine. You know,
Yeah.
tell him I said hey. Uncle Ernie said hello. You know, the and big hug to Lisa. I just love you guys, and I'm glad you're there. You're such an add, you know, to everything. And I wanted to make sure that the audience understood that there is a purpose, a segment of the freedom community, the liberty community, that you definitely avoid you fill. What would you say that was? With autonomy, Grand Theft World, you know, The Brain, Tragedy and Hope. Would you pick one that you think would be the most useful in the movement? What do you think?
It's a tough question, dude. I mean, all the things that I've produced were supposed to have, or they're intended to have a specific effect to help people level up in their liberty thinking, right? So if I were to say the ultimate history lesson, that only points you at like the school system. If I said state of mind, the psychology of control, that just points at these things over there. But really what I've been pointing out is these people are in a concert doing these things to us from a multiplicity of angles. And that each one we knock down with knowledge and understanding and experience, then we have more attention and energy to focus on the ones that are remaining and harder to break down. But everything that I've designed and published in the past, 20 years has been created with the intention that first, it's art to illustrate things that are real in our environment. So art is the artificial thing. It's an artifice coming from the arm of man, and it's usually a fiction. Most art is fiction, but my art is a fiction showing you reality, right? So the things that I put into an episode were not meant to go into that episode, but the result of that artistic rendering gives you an understanding of something in our reality that you could not have gotten or wouldn't have gotten another way. So I try to create that art so it reflects back reality. It's like creating mirror as an art. It shows you the thing that's there, but it gives it to you from an angle you can't see directly.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about. No, thank you. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about before we finish is important to me. Our Occupy the Land thing is the now what? All right, Ernie, now what? Now what? Now what? Now what? My thing is I'm looking for solutions. And the solution for me and the family, we're like, look, man, I see what's coming. It's inevitable. There's no stopping it. It's going to be, a great reset of something, whether you like it or not. And you just want to, not be roadkill. Don't stand on the railroad track. I mean, if you want to key it as it goes by, or key the Titanic as it sinks, or you want to count coup on something, or just make you feel better, whatever. But it's this is going to happen, and I don't see a method by which to stop the collapse, or that you even should. I mean, it just needs to be redone. It's so bad, and I'm wondering what the best course of action is for a lot of people. I went to the Ron Paul 90th birthday party in Lake Jackson, Texas this last weekend. And it was very refreshing to see all these revolutionaries, a lot of them from 08. Because the 08 and 12 were different. 12 were, they're jumping on the bandwagon, and this is cool, let's do this again. All right, we get to keep them up at the podium again? All right, cool, let's do that. But they wanted to monetize it. They wanted to, create, a thing. Campaign for Liberty had been done, and they're going to, do it right this time, as opposed to this spontaneous order of activists out there doing what they wanted with their own money. They wanted to kind of direct it and make a, MAGA thing out, something. And that was why we did it the way we did in 08. There was, no one was in charge, so everybody was. It was that kind of mentality that I made absolutely sure was the mindset, of everything that we did. Now, when we went back, I wanted to see which direction was being emphasized. we're going to get the band back together. It's Godfather 3, and they're going to pull you back in, that kind of thing. So I'm just going, what is it that we're going to do to maintain and enhance our own freedom, Generation Next understanding, all the work that you've done to be able to have, intellectual defense against whatever. What is it? Where do you go to get the information to really understand what the best thing for you to do for yourself, your family, your progeny, your relationship, your spouse, to have a family, go forth and multiply, have a place to grow your own freaking, educate your own damn kids. I mean, this kind of basic fundamental stuff. After conversations and talk with the people, a lot of things, there was one thing that really was, I think, that they felt a prerequisite to everything, and it was full disclosure. Stop lying. Tell everything. How many aliens we got? Tulsi Gabbard came and spoke, and the week before she's going on, yeah, there's going to be some reveals. We got some of them there aliens, we're going to do it up. And I've always, done, and you and I have talked about this. I do regular shows with, Corbett and so on, and we're always of the opinion, when they bring out the aliens, they're scraping the barrel, man. We're gonna launch something on you. We're gonna distract you. We're gonna whatever. Here come the aliens. Well, I got the impression, and from conversations, we had Stuart Rhodes on, this morning, and he was the one that was really hammering on this thing too, is full disclosure. We need to know we paid for it. We're American people. We're Americans. And, but idiocracy hadn't set in too far. I mean, we're not that stupid. We need to know. Know what? Everything. Everything. There is no secret that I want. Everything. We'll figure it out. Everything. But I don't see that coming from the Trump administration, even after a lot of promises that they were going to disclose a lot of stuff. JFK, RFK, MLK, Epstein list. Oh, there's nothing to see. Epstein, you're still talking about him? I was like, whoa, he totally screwed up on that one. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? After all that you've been, and then Dan Bongino goes into the FBI, we'll see what happens there.
What list?
Exactly. And that's what I was building up to. I saw, because I couldn't see with your banner on the bottom what it did, So what list? Yeah, it's Epstein. There we go. Go ahead and stand up a little bit. Pull it up so we can see it. There you go. What list? So what do you think is going to happen on this? Are we going to get a disclosure? Are we going to get, gaslit by Trump after all this stuff? What is Trump's real game? What does he play? Why is it that he thought he could get away with that? That's scary right there. Of all the things that he's done, because this is my big concern. We do the Trump report for 10 years, and we do it because Dr. Frank is a real fan, but he's kind of coming around because I'm saying, yeah, we'll do it. I can say you're still voting a bunch of times. I don't see delegating our authority and autonomy to somebody else, something else, a party, a person, whatever. That is the problem. That's the problem. Yeah, but he's a good guy. I don't care. It's not, I represent me, So what is it you think that he's playing? What's controlling him? Could it be Satan? I mean, what is it that is going on in your opinion? I really respect what you think should be done, how we should approach this. What is there a greater reset we're ready to slap on it? We're going to just
when
ignore
you think
it, you
back of all the secrets that they've held since, the way that they've developed national security since 1947 is that they've kept a lot of secrets. So what people think is going on is not connected to reality any longer. So there's a lot of those secrets that they would have to disclose, and I would never trust them to disclose or even have the power to disclose on some of that stuff. On the other hand, I would just simply say, what demarcation or line do you have, threshold, that's a better word. What's your threshold? How much do you need to know that something is going on, that it's real, that it adversely affects your freedom before you're willing to go focus on maybe learning how to grow some food, improve your relationships, up your earning power, all the things that make us strong and bold and free in the first place. So I only think that people need to know enough that they're like, that's real, that's going on, it threatens my freedom, and I'm over here now, and I'm going to insulate myself from that illness. I'm going to tell other people what's going on. I'm going to introduce solutions into the free market that address that problem instead of just complaining about it. And I think that's the healthy way to approach it, because when you look up like at a 50,000 foot level at all this tyranny and corruption that's gone on, it's gone on throughout human history. So it's always going to have a place. Right now, it's at a Spinal Tap 11, and we could turn it down to 2 or 3. But you're always going to have some corrupt people and some bad leaders and people, like, nonsense, right? I just think that they've exaggerated the nonsense to where it doesn't even serve humanity's future anymore. It threatens us and our future and our children and grandchildren in this picture, and that it's what red-blooded men would do to stand up against tyranny through history. When they recognize such things going on in their midst, they refuse to tolerate it. They refuse to give energy, attention. They refuse to give fear to it, and they become unstoppable. And that's where freedom has always emerged in civilizations of the past.
What sparks that, and what prevents that? I always ask people why. I'm going, why do you care? Why did you, bring this on? Why, do you write? Why? Because if I can find that secret sauce, man, we would change the planet right away. And that was one thing. We had Whitney Webb on, and I was, as a young woman, a lot of the stuff that she had written, our audience knows. Generally, it's always tragedy porn of we get the, more details and they're bad. And Ernie, freedom good, government bad. Ernie, but he did okay, so I get to add a bad. They're bad. In this one, I get 5 bads now, 9. I was up to 9 bad. Really? I get it. They're bad, okay? They do things because they can. So for Whitney, it was important to me, and later we had Ian Davis on. They worked together. And he, being older, he understood. He was a lot more acceptive of my questions. Because to Whitney, I'm going, as a young woman, why did you care? Why did you start writing it? Why did you focus on why? What teacher, parent, coach, employer, somebody, uncle influenced you? What book did you read? What was it that made you go so deep into this? Why? At a young age. Why? I don't think she was very supportive of that line of questioning, and she answered. It was a good conversation. It was a unique conversation of anyone that's ever interviewed Whitney Webb. This is definitely different, other than just rotating a lot of the stuff that a lot of us know. She does a lot of really good research. I'll give her that. But I was very curious in the why. Now, with you, we've done the same thing early on with you, and because you're a farm boy and worked rural and kind of knowing these people are good and Manhattan bad, they're really bad. So it was same thing with Lisa, your wife. But what's the secret sauce, do you think? Why people care? Why? When you talk about, and then the people, they understand this, they see it as a threat to their freedoms, it affects them personally. We see what's coming, and gosh darn it, I want to be able to put food on my family. Whatever. But why do they care? Why are they making the effort? Why do they recognize the threat and take action? If we understand that, the motivation for people to get up, and not for society or for their community, everybody, hell, just at least for themselves. Then you get people that have some compassion for their community, and they want to supply and be part of and altruistic about feeding people that need food and kind of stuff. I'm looking for the human element that we care about the evil in the world and we're willing to do something about it. What's the secret to that motivation, do you think, Richard?
I think the golden rule has a lot to do with it. Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. I think my appreciation for the type of freedom, the brand of freedom that I was born into, like when I was 3, when it was like the bicentennial of America and everything was America and it's all red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
And it's a place that is unique in history because freedom is never given. It's always taken. It's usually taken by force throughout history. So the fact that I was born into a place where we had some freedoms left, we didn't have to take them by force, being exposed to people trying to erode those freedoms, I was not partial to their plan. I thought that them ripping off people who are innocent, like that goes back to the golden rule. If that was happening to me, I would want someone to try to stop these people. If I was falling into pitfalls, I would want someone else to mark those pitfalls. So as someone who survived some of those, I started putting up big signs. Or as one of my bosses said during my trial, because I was blowing the whistle outside of the team at that point, he said, "Why do you have to broadcast this like a tenor from the top of the Empire State Building?" And I think that's how you let other people know. That's how you know. That's how you sound the alarm, bro. And the fact that he's on the other side, on the other side. Well, he takes he's no longer with us anymore. He passed away, but he took the money and bought a new boat, a new engine for his boat for $30,000 or whatever back in the day. So there were people who justified doing wrong to other people because they would never interact with those people they were stealing from, but that was still stealing. That was still putting our entire economy at risk, because after I blew the whistle came the subprime mortgage crisis, where all of these companies conspired in their email to do these things and rip these people off, and nobody was held to account because all that evidence is no longer actionable when they delete it and they use the back door in the mandated congressional software system that was supposed to protect our companies from such frauds. So they're selling a prophylactic. It has a hole in it. I thought, would I like to be the recipient of a prophylactic that does the opposite thing than what I thought it did? No, probably not. So, I did not want them to.
Why do you
if you
care?
let them get the best of you, you're letting them get the best of your world.
I need to know the why. I need to know the secret.
I appreciate this world too much to let it be.
What documentary? I need to know what vegetable.
Thankful and appreciative for this experience. Yeah.
One of the things, I get you comment on this. We got kind of a delay. So
I do it because I can.
There you go. See, there's with great abilities, which you have, comes responsibility. And then it's like, okay, well, why do you feel the responsibility or to act on that response? See, I'm looking for the secret sauce. If there was something, a documentary, a cartoon, a
self-respect
book, whatever in the beginning, early on, and those things they've beaten either out of, the system or out of the individual. Because I remember when I was a kid, it was required reading for Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, 1984. Hell, you're not allowed now. There was something that brought us together as Americans. That there was something special. There was a light on the hill. There was a responsibility, a duty you had to, screw Uncle Sam, but I mean to the cons, the Republic, the Pledge of Allegiance for which it stands kind of thing. Of course, then the pledge itself is like an issue. But, the point is the concept. And they're beating it out of generations next. I had what my kids went through. I have grandkids now. I'll soon have great-grandkids. And you could see after COVID, there was a lot of our kids, screw this, we're homeschooling. Or we go to a charter school or a private school that we like. Or what, there was definitely more responsibility that people took for the raising of their children instead of just turning it over to the government. And that has a lot of positive results I'm sure we'll experience. But if you were, because you did a lot, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because you were very supportive of John Taylor Gatto. John Taylor Gatto had spoken to one of our Freedom Summits. He was very influential in the early 80s when, we would, new libertarians, required reading was John Taylor Gatto. And here was a man that was like, I think twice was Teacher of the Year in New York, and he, kind of came from business or something. He, I'm the #1 teacher, most popular teacher, the best, most effective teacher. I didn't listen to any of your crap. I did it, my way kind of thing. He's written books. He has had a lot of influence on people. We understood the history of what schooling was about and what it was used for and why. And I'm looking for that kind of solution. What is it? How are you raising Luke? What would you suggest people to fix a broken society? There has to be a solution, and I'm looking for the building of competent, self-starting young men and women that are going to, hit the ground running as adults. And we definitely don't have that. By design, I think so. What's the solution, Mr. Education Richard Grove? Explain it to us.
Education becomes schooling when you remove the free will of the individual. So one of the keys is preserving the free will of the child within a structure that they can still remain safe and effectively growing toward their goals. 2 weeks after we filmed that interview, he passed away a couple years ago, but he mentored a lot of us after his stroke and helped us to understand further into the problems he was pointing out. But I also got some encouragement early on, probably 5-10 years before Molyneux. When Molyneux was talking about nonviolent parenting and peaceful relationships, I was like, wow, obviously my parents didn't get that memo because I got paddled as a kid, and
right.
A lot of kids I knew got paddled and beaten way worse, right? So like anytime I got spanked as a kid, I deserved it. I know I deserved it. I did something, and that type of correction back then was pretty minimal. And I grew up around people who had a pretty optimal upbringing, given what I've learned about other people's upbringing in this world. And so trying to do what we can do to make our son's, childhood the best it can be. So, there's that libertarian meme, like, at what age do you spank or beat or physically, chastise a child? Is it before they can understand and then you could use words, or they can't understand, so it doesn't matter? So there's like that whole conundrum that you should not be physically correcting children as they have done for centuries, apparently, and that you can have a better growth experience with less trauma on their part by just using words and communicating. And that has been very successful in our, doesn't ever have to get to that physical place where it got so many times with me as a kid. And I'm sure
Right,
Lisa's
I've had my
experience.
share of whoopings. What is the standard that you hold for a child? What's the standards? How, and the follow up and the insistence and what punishment is the most effective? You can't go on the computer. You know what I mean? Take away your smartphone. You're never getting a smartphone. I mean, it's. I'm wondering what you think is effective.
Understanding is effective. Being heard, being a good listener as a parent, and having a relationship where he always gets to express his side of things, even if the result's not what he's looking for. He at least got to express himself, attempt to negotiate his way around it, all those good things that kids do. I'm fortunate where I'm pretty calm, cool, collected, and he listens very well. So there's not a need for a whole lot of there's no need for corporal punishment, and there's very little need for discipline other than asking twice or explaining it a different way, or the point at which he understands is the point where now if he deviates from that, that's a correctable circumstance. I told you not to go off property, and then we had to go find you, and that causes these other problems, so then you'd have a conversation about that. But from what I've seen of my friends who have children, a lot of them struggle with the communication part and the listening part because they themselves are coming out of, being brought up as a child in different circumstances and haven't had the chance to thoughtfully respond they're still like in reaction mode, right? And that's just a sign of maturity. When you are at the point when you can get stimulus and not just react, but you can think about that and you can choose a response. That's the difference between freedom and slavery right there. So by modeling freedom for the children, by doing it ourselves, I think it's a lot easier for them to pick up on right, wrong, truth, fiction, these other basics that they need to go out into the world and be successful and safe.
That's a good share. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm looking, before we finish, I wanted to give an opportunity for you to, pimp whatever it is you want to promote, but also predictions, the future. Where does this end? I mean, here we go. We have Trump going into Washington, D.C. with National Guard. We got, we're going to martial law the city. We're going to get rid of the homeless. We're going to use uniforms, and we're going to, kick ass. When the economy goes and the dollar, cracks and the, stuff, the great reset be a happening, I'm worried that there is going to be legitimate protesting or representation by people in the streets or whatever, peaceful, but it's going to be like the United Kingdom. You said a bad thing about something, but we don't like, and jail. It's Canada's starting to fine you, tens of thousands of dollars if you go in the woods. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And when there's any show of dissent, I'm afraid once you open up that martial law, uniforms on the street kind of thing, yeah, get out of the city. But I'm worried. I'm thinking things are going to, it won't happen all at once. You're seeing that. I mean, there's, the artillery shells lighting up over the horizon, but then all of a sudden, it'll happen overnight. It'll be Monday, and then boom, here we are in the middle of. And it could be a banking thing, a holiday, we're shifting over to digital, we got, something. What do you think's going to happen? And how are the people going to react? How are we conditioned to accept it? And anyone that's a dissenter gets shot? I mean, what are you looking at? What do you think's going to happen?
Expectations, and then when those expectations don't come to fruition, people get disappointed. So instead of predicting, let me just observe the obvious. These people becoming aware of, and they are hoping that they keep it slow enough that the public doesn't have a reaction or even a thoughtful, justified, freedom-based response. And they're trying to normalize things. So the more we hear about Epstein and Ghislaine's out, like I think she's out of prison right now. She's walking around on her own recognizance of, I don't know, is she getting immunity? Is she getting a pardon? Who were the Johns that she was protecting? Yeah, she's on work release like Epstein was back in the day. Epstein was an informant for the FBI before he was a convicted sex criminal. That's on the record. I've seen the DOD or the DOJ documents on that. So I would just predict you're going to get more of the same at increased levels until we have the self-respect and the self-education to start to stand up effectively, to communicate cogently to other people that they can understand the gravamen or the importance of these issues, the weightiness of these issues, and that they need to be addressed sooner than later, because you've got players like Bill Gates making, all sorts of mosquito plans for your future and future pandemics and working away around your freedom and eroding it. So it's time for people to get learnified and, get on their horse and ride toward freedom.
Where's that? You said it, man. Get on the horse and let's ride. What horse? How are we riding? What kind of hat am I wearing? I mean, come on, man.
Well, you're already at freedomsphoenix.com, but you could also go to GrandTheftWorld.com, and up here you could click. When we are live, you can watch it on the site. When you want to catch the replays, you can watch it live. You can catch the replay. You can go in here to Clip Genie, and you could search any topic in our show, and that is going to give you a search index of every episode. So there's 245 episodes of Grand Theft World, and the Clip Genie allows us to go in there and search any of those episodes, it'll bring up a transcript. It'll highlight what you're talking, what you're looking for, and then it produces a clip. That's why it's called Clip Genie. It'll take that so you can share it instantly on social media, and that is that's a game changer right there. So that feature functionality in Grand Theft World, aside from our town halls, and
I do a search and it creates a clip for me, or that you've already had, but it's a custom clip that I generate with my inquiry.
Okay, so I'm going to type in Ernie. Well, yes, all the above. So I'm going to search Ernie, and let's see if I talked about you. Oh, look, I talked about you a couple times. So any of these episodes, we might be able to jump in here. Let's go to this one view episode, and let's see. Does that say Hancock afterwards? Anyway, that's Ernie. So you have a time code here. You could highlight, and then you could press these buttons and generate a clip and share it to social media. And it'll take you right now. If I click that, it takes me right to that part of the 7-hour show. So it'll take you right to the clip. It'll show you, and you can expand it too. So you can make the clip bigger or smaller. But anyway, that's a way that we empower our audience to be able to educate their friends, family, coworkers much quicker, because now they can dial in. Hey, I wanted you to see this thing about mRNA that Robert Malone said, but you're not going to watch the 7-hour episode. So here's how you dial it in to get people to watch the 7-hour episode and actually understand the news each week instead of just being subject to it.
This is one thing that I genuinely feared. I want to express myself on this so you understand my point. I was afraid that now the technology is there. They download all the MP3s of everything I've ever said, for 20 years. They put it in text format. They, search it. It goes up. AI's looking at and got whatever. Then my sister goes to, 23andMe or whatever and gets our DNA done. And then they're going, ding, there's a little bit too much William Wallace and Ernie here. And he said this and a drone strike. I mean, it's just get enough data. They're going to take out Richard and Ernie and, fill in the blank of a threat to the future of. And I'm going, yeah, it's kind of like a Terminator thing. And I'm going, they wouldn't do that. That'd be wrong. So, I'm just concerned. So but I do want my own Jarvis. I want my own. I don't want Alexa. I want Jarvis. I'd love to have my own AI, and it'd be mine. We're being prepared for what kind of future?
I think the future is us learning how to use that technology and remain in freedom.
An autonomy class.
Did the ones and zeros come through?
I'm wondering if there's an autonomy class for that very thing.
The delay.
To be able to be informed about how to use AI. Is that something that you guys have included?
Well, I teach human skills for a human world. So over at getautonomy.info, we teach people there are ways that AI could help you, but you also want to see that it's a double-edged sword. You don't want it in your life too much. You don't want to lose your ability to think. And when people go to Get Autonomy, these are the insight into the human skills that allow you to leverage AI, but not be overrun by AI. And the gist is that people go through the primer course and they get transparency. They become fully informed. And then in order to be able to explore the course of breakthrough actions further, they have to talk to a graduate. So they click a button and they schedule a call. And now they have headed off at the pass all these potential areas of failure where they didn't understand, wrong expectations, all these things were taken out of the equation. And now we can start working with people in a way that they can immediately start getting traction and becoming successful. And it's an easy process. It's a rewarding process that goes on year after year after year with these skills. And, it's just what I could do during the week to battle they, them, those who can easily be named and have far too many fingers and pies that are eroding our freedom. So I figured decentralize the information, decentralize education, decentralize the power structure, and embolden everybody to become a strong, autonomous individual who can then work as part of a team that is fully functional and not filled with people with scarcity mindset, provisional self-esteem, learned helplessness, extended adolescence, all these things that schooling kind of plagues us with.
You know, I forgot all about this. You were the one, we were visiting you in Connecticut, and we came up with, we were talking about doing this. Open source education online. And we actually, here, I'll show you. We actually did it, and this was James Corbett, you know, the very videos that I thought were so important to do this. Where do we go for this kind of thing for you? You know, this is, you know, if I were to go to get the best videos, the best long form, the whatever, show me and the audience, go ahead and pull up your share screen and go ahead and show the people where they should go to get this kind of thing. Because I'm all down on this education thing.
Well, what we do is we help people start their own personal revolution. And if you want, you know, for your audience to have a free masterclass, turning your lead into gold, overcoming your fear. These are masterclasses that I've created for free for people to help them get to the point where they can start doing some triage, mend their wounds, start growing in a healthy direction. And the link for the personal revolution is bit.ly/personal-revolution. I couldn't make it much easier than that. But if you go to getautonomy.info, you click around, click some buttons, get involved. You'll also bit.ly. It's a popular site for shortening links out there in the freedom world. I'm glad to explain it to you.
All right. bit.ly, and then what was the rest
otherwise
of the...
people just go to getautonomy.com/personal-revolution.
Personal revolution. See, this is the one thing for the audience. I just want you to know this is what Richard brings to the table. He has always took the time to learn himself, oftentimes from original documents, how to research, and being, you know, having access to Manhattan and so on. He had a lot of resources, and of course he's learned online, you know, how to get it online. And then he has a army of students that are out there that add to the mix for the next students. Alumni are just, and you get plugged in, you get to find out. Plus, you have the networking effect of all kinds of things. There are so many materials, and I've given you some stories of people that are just educated about the world, how it really works, financing, politics, they, them, those, new world order of we, you know, decide we're going to do it because eugenically we're superior, and we're going to because you're letting us, and you're stupid enough to let us, so you deserve to be ruled by me because you're letting us. So it has been so worthy an effort that I wanted to make sure you got to be reintroduced to Richard and all of the things that he and Lisa have put together for you to make use of, and the network that he has, because we're going into the time that this stuff is going to be necessary. Why did they, how did, when did they, what was the reason? It's all there. And I mean, and how much time do you, I mean, like the kids that were driving up from Florida, 23 hours of, oh my God, and then they walk out and there's Richard standing there. That's a serendipity, you know, could it be divine inspiration kind of thing, man? I mean, you know, these kids are totally freaking blown away. But how long do you think people would get the gist of it? You know, like open source education.online, you know, James's stuff that I kind of helped curate that I thought was important, that I'm always sending out to everybody. So I just send them there. If they're doing your course of all the important stuff from Richard Grove, how long do you think it'd take them? How much time investment?
I mean, I've put into the study and research and production tens of thousands of hours. So it only takes them like, I don't know, 1,500 hours. I don't know. You don't have to watch everything I've ever produced, but if you did, you'd know a lot about the world in a non-contradictory manner. So, if you want to start someplace, start at Peace Revolution 23, how to free your mind, work yourself forward or backward through my repertoire, and get all learnified.
Get learnified. It's so important what you do, and I'm so pleased to be able to access your mind and resources of just talk to Richard, and then I feel better whether I'm crazy or not, or something really goes, well, of course, let me show you the document. It's right here. 1972, they did the thing of this is the thing of the thing. Didn't you know that, Ernie? Geezer boy? You should know that. We're alive. So it's always that kind of resource that Richard supplies us. And I wanted to make sure, and when things get kind of crazier as things go on, we're going to have him come back. There's a lot of the stuff he's predicted, has given all of the information of how and who's going to do what's required of them to maintain their relationships with the god of Zog or something, the worship at the Bohemian, whatever the hell. And I'm telling you, it's always good to have someone explain in context why things are happening, where it's going. And the big thing is, you need to become a man and a woman, be full human being, be able to communicate, be able to express yourself, and be able to keep breathing in and out by using your liberty, your hands. You're free to do a bunch of stuff. You're not incarcerated. You're not in a cage. You're not handcuffs. You could do it. Are you? But I'm not at liberty to do it. Well, you think you need a permission slip, then you got another issue. So you're at liberty to sustain your life, to provide for your life, to be able to fashion raw materials into your property. It's life, liberty, property. It's kind of three ways of saying the same thing, that you own you and what you create, and you can defend that. Once you get into that mindset, you find a place to do it, and do it. Give you the final word, Richard. Anything you want to share before you go?
Thank you guys all for tuning in and not dropping out. Here's big hugs, and I love you guys to Ernie and Donna to play us out.
All right. Thanks. Peace, brother. Hold on a second. I want to talk to you. We'll be going out right now.